Schönen guten Abend, guten Abend, bonsoir, good evening. I would like to welcome you to our discussion round, which will focus on the anthology Eure Heimat ist unser Albtraum, Your Homeland is Our Nightmare, published by Fatma Aydemir and Hengameh Yaghoobifarah at the beginning of 2019. Originally, this event was supposed to take place in Brussels, and I'm very happy that all the participants were willing to move it into the digital world. I would like to thank Passa Porta Brüssel International House of Literature, the Literaturhaus Berlin, Volkshochschule Muldental and Leipziger Land, and Sigrid Bousset of Flagey Brussels for your wonderful cooperation and support, and also my colleague Julian Volz for the organization. A warm welcome to the authors Fatma Aydemir, Mithu, Sanyal, and Marc Czollek, who have all written a personal essay for the anthology. The discussion will be moderated by Marc Reugebrink. Marc Reugebrink is a Dutch author living in Belgium. He has published numerous books in the field of poetry, novel, and essayism. He also was publisher and editor of several literary magazines as De Gids and Young. He writes regularly for different Dutch-speaking newspapers and magazines as De Morgen, De Standard, and Knack.be, and the other participants will be introduced by Marc later. Thank you very much, and I now pass on to Ilke Freuen from Passa Porta Brussels.
Part of the discussion will be held here at Passa Porta, Brussels International House of Literature. We have an independent bookstore. We do lots of events throughout the year. We have an online magazine, a Writers in Residence program, and every 2 years a big international literary festival in the city of Brussels. So a lot of reasons for literature to be at home at Passa Porta. The name itself doesn't have any specific meaning, but it carries a lot of meanings, of course. First of all, it's a reference to the long corridor, this and sort of invitation to enter into our central space, which is a little bit away from the street. Donc, en français, passer la porte. The big meaning or underlying meaning is a reference to passport, because passports often limit us, define us as human beings, and we want literature to be a free and open space, so no limitations for passports. You can just enter the space of literature here. So it should be that kind of place for readers and for writers alike. So we're really happy to be part of this discussion, because it's a theme that we think that really merits to be elaborated. So very much looking forward to the discussion.
Welcome everyone to the discussion about Eure Heimat ist unser Albtraum, loosely translated as Your Homeland is Our Nightmare. Whether Heimat is the same thing as homeland, we will no doubt discuss this afternoon. I'm here in Passa Porta in Brussels, joined by Mithu Sanyal. Welcome, Mithu. And in Berlin, I wish I was there, Fatma Aydemir and Marc Czollek are in the Literaturhaus in Berlin. Welcome to you too. I will first briefly introduce the guests to you. Fatma Aydemir was born in Karlsruhe in 1986, studied German and American studies at the Goethe-Universität in Frankfurt am Main. She lives in Berlin and has been an editor at the daily newspaper Die Tageszeitung since 2012. Also writes articles for numerous magazines, including the music magazine Specs, I don't know if you're still doing that, and the feminist Missy magazine. And her first novel, Ellbogen, was published by Karl Hanse Verlag in 2017. Ellbogen has been adapted for the stage by several theatres, and it was awarded the Klaus Michael Kühne Prize at the Harbour Front Literature Festival. It has been translated into Dutch with much success, I must say. And I wondered, are there any other translations, Fatma, coming up for you?
Album, not yet, unfortunately.
Not yet, no. Not in Turkish yet.
Actually, it was translated into Turkish, but the translation was really a catastrophe, so we had to stop the whole process, and I hope that we will find another chance to translate it.
Anything new coming up? Any new novels? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of time now in terms of Corona. No, I'm kidding. I'm writing on my second novel right now.
Okay.
I think the deadline is the end of this year, so hopefully it will come out sometime next year.
Okay, looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sanyal, present here, born in 1971 in Düsseldorf, and you still live there? Lived there all your life in Düsseldorf?
On and off, yes.
On and off, yes. Studied German and English literature at the Heinrich Heine University, wrote her doctoral thesis on the cultural history of the female genital, it said on Wikipedia, which
isn't true. I wrote my doctoral thesis on the cultural history of the vulva, but now we know that not only women have vulvas, so we've learned something since back when I wrote it.
Okay. Well, anyway, the book Vulva was written in 2009 from your doctoral thesis. And it's considered pioneering work on the topic and has been discussed in many media. Since 1996, Mithu has been a permanent author for WDR on radio, is that? Yes, you make radio plays. And for NDR, BR, Frankfurter Rundschau, Literaturhaus, TASS, Junge Welt, Bundeszentrale, für politische Bildung, etc. A lot. Honorary editor of the feminist magazine Wir Frauen, I read, and since the publication of your second book, Vergewaltigung, Rape, in 2016, you have often been invited, as you are now, as an expert in public discussions, readings, lectures, etc. Can we expect new work from you very soon?
Yes, I'm about to finish my first novel, so
a novel too.
Yeah, and we will all three be with the same publisher. So this is a nice kind of get together again.
Unser, is that?
Yeah, we all be at Unser.
Okay.
And it's I should be finished by the end of next month. I doubt it, but yeah, by the middle of July I should.
You've
be
got
finished.
a title already? You want to share with us?
Yeah, the title is called Identity, like identity and breasts. So it's about identity, politics, and sex. But it's a novel.
But it's a novel,
yes.
Okay. Czollek, born in 1987, you're the youngest one today. Studied political science in Berlin. From 2012 to 2016, he completed his doctorate on anti-Semitism in early Christianity, and since 2016 he has been part of the editorial collective of Yalta, Positionen zur jüdischen Gegenwart. From 2013 to 2017, he organized the literature series Gegenwartsbewältigung. I think that's a wonderful word. Untranslatable. It means something like coping with the present, I suppose. Together with Denise Utluk for the Max Gorki Theatre, and together with Sasha Mariana Salzman, he was also the initiator of the Disintegration Congress in 2016 on contemporary Jewish positions, as well as the Radical Jewish Culture Days in 2017. And in 2018, Max published his, I think, highly explosive book, Desintegriert euch, which can only be translated with Desintegrate, in which he formulated a critique of the functionalization of Jewish and migrant positions in Germany. He's also a poet. He's, so far to my knowledge, published 3 collections of poetry. He's a member of the lyric collective G13 or G13, initiator of the international lyric project Babelsprech. Too much to mention, actually. You're a very busy man. No doubt I've left out a few things here. The same question for you: can we expect new work from you soon, and if so, what will it be?
Yes, actually, yes. And I can say in public that the book's almost done, so the Corona times were kind of helpful for me to be able to finish that. It carries, it's another non-fiction book, and it carries the same title that you just named as untranslatable, Gegenwartsbewältigung, which, I know, I mean, if you want, we can talk about that maybe a bit later, as also the title of the essay in the book we're going to talk about in just a moment. I find it curious that we're all part of the Hansa group. I think that wasn't like that when we became a part of this book, but now it just turned out that way. I'm really happy. Me too. I mean, it's good to have you in the family as well. I mean, Fatma and I have been for a while, but great to have you in the family.
I feel adopted. That feels good. We're talking about belonging anyway tonight, so.
You should all publish it together at the same date. Okay, my first question. We're going to the book. I'm going to show it in front of the camera. Eure Heimat ist unser Albtraum. It really says that because the only thing you actually read is Heimat ist Albtraum. But the Eure und unser, also your and our, is only visible when you hold it really close to your eye. I would like to start with Fatma because you're one of the editors of this book. And I simply want to know where did the idea for this book originally come from? Or was there an immediate cause for this book?
So my co-editor, Hengameh Yaghoobifarah, who's a journalist and author as well, Hengameh and me, we together were, we were planning to do a essay collection, anthology with different authors who we are fans of, who we admire as writers, but also writers who position themselves politically to, have a book that's on the one hand fun to read, and on the other hand is kind of a response to the political developments that we are going through, or we were going through and still are. With the rise of the right wing, with the, intensifying racist language in mainstream politics. And it was actually a coincidence that at the same time that we were thinking about doing such a book, this so-called Heimatministerium was founded. So the Ministry for Domestic Policy, I think, was renamed with the forming of a new coalition government. And this whole Heimat thing, or the institutionalization of the word Heimat, all of a sudden was a good, let's say, an interesting incident to talk about, to just take this word and or this idea and how do you say? Yeah, to just start from that and talk about the different realities in this country, the different problems that we are facing right now. And so we made a list of the authors and talked to each of them. And the ones who agreed to be part of this, they all happen to be also part of different marginalized communities, but at the same time, most of them are really acclaimed writers. The idea was to actually bring discourses, debates that are happening for so many years and decades, the discussions about racism, about sexism, on class, gender, to bring it to a mainstream level, to have this discussion more visible, because these are debates that are, accessible to only certain groups. And with a mainstream publisher like Ullstein, we thought, we can reach out to more readers. And also, I have to say, like now a little more than a year passed since the publication, and the book was visible in the mainstream, fortunately. We also got a lot of feedback letters and emails from people who said that it's the first time actually they got in touch with this kind of idea is maybe not good to say, because there are 14 authors and they all have just different views and different standpoints and stories to tell. But for many readers, it was the first time to get in touch with a lot of the authors and a lot of the ideas that are in this book, which I would sum up just as, to use maybe Mac's words from Disintegrate from his book. I think our book reflects the radical diversity that is the reality in Germany. but which is always kind of left out in this whole discourse about Heimat, about integration, which is always about like a white majority society which is being threatened by people who are not allegedly part of it.
Yes, that must be the reason why the definition with which the book opens of Heimat, which took me aback a little because, well, I'm a foreigner and I didn't think it was that bad in Germany. The definition given, Heimat stands for a homologous Christian white society in which men have the say, women are mainly concerned about having children, and other realities of life simply do not exist. The first thing I thought when I read that was, why do you let this ultra-right, I would almost say fascist definition of Heimat, why do you open with that? Is that really the reality in Germany? Is that what is meant by Heimat? This backworded, old-fashioned, terrible idea?
Well, it is one of the meanings that Heimat has, definitely. Yes. And it's that meaning which is being made invisible in the moment that, you know, in 2018, all of a sudden Heimat is like a common word in politics and is the name of a ministry, but we didn't really have a discussion about why this renaming is happening and what kind of implications this term has. And I think, yeah, of course, it's very provocative in the introduction to use just, you know, this. I mean, yes. It's very short. We have to keep it short, but we have a wonderful text by Mithu Sanyal actually in the book, which it's a very brilliant essay, and I would say it's like the heart of the book. We also placed it in the middle, like a heart, and it really explains how many different meanings Heimat actually had in Germany. So we are aware of that in the book. It explains how Heimat varies with within the different time periods, and with its use by different groups and individuals. Yeah. Because also the left has several times tried to appropriate this word, for example. And I mean, this is all in the book. Yes. But the problem is that we, in the moment this word just landed in our politics and in our mainstream, people totally forgot or didn't want to think about actually its roots also in Nazi ideology, because Heimat really played a big role in that. And I cannot understand why we act as if it's just an emotional image and not a highly political term that is linked with this history. I mean, it's as if we pretend that history is like a box that is locked and it doesn't have to do anything with us today, so we can use Heimat the way we want it. But that's not true. You know, history never ended, and we are obliged to rethink it and rename it maybe with different generations, because today a lot of new people actually are taking part in this discussion who were not speaking in, you know, recent decades maybe. Yes.
You, Mithu, in your essay, you talk about the necessity of having a Heimat.
Oh, well, I think it is necessary, but it's necessary evil, so to speak. And we, like Fatma said, we do mix things up. We are talking about the emotional content of Heimat, so everybody needs to belong somewhere. But there's also a political meaning, a political dimension to it. And the political dimension basically came into play whenever people got the right to become citizens. In Germany, especially, we started talking about Heimat as soon as people like us had the opportunity to become German citizens. So that was not possible. We have this, you could only be a German if your father was a German man. So in Germany, Germanness was kind of inherited, and you could only inherit it from your father. And then the women's movement fought for the right of German women to give their nationality to their kids. And since 2000, there's this idea that you can, by being German, by living in Germany, by paying your taxes in Germany, by working in Germany, you could become German. And as soon as that started, as soon as you could get a German passport, the right started talking about Heimat. So it is a kind of, yes, you can become German, but not real German. You're just a passport German. That is one of these right-wing terms that they coined. You're a passport German, and the real Heimat Germans, the real indigenous Germans, we all know the indigenous people were black. So they don't mean those. They don't mean those. They mean, and this is the definition more or less that Fatma and Hengameh quoted at the beginning, this white Germanness, the idea that to be German you have to be white. And we don't have the same kind of discussion with other people coming to Germany, living in Germany, like my husband is English, and nobody asks him, where do you come from? And why not? Because he's come from England 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So it would be adequate to ask him. You can hear it in his language, but I was born in Germany. I get asked all the time. So you kind of, other people, you give them the signal you don't really belong. Please don't really belong. And that is something that is dangerous for society. It is not good for society. So even if you were a right-wing politician, you should rethink that, because you can't just throw everyone out. It's impossible. So why do you want people to not feel like a part of society? What is the good in that? And when the Ministry for the Interior became the Heimat, the Homeland Security, they modeled themselves on the American Homeland Security, really, and that was about getting rid of immigrants, and that is the idea behind this. And so we were trying to say, yes, but homeland, Heimat, means something else for us. When other people talk about homeland, they say, oh, the food, and I like the weather, or I like, I don't know, the architecture. And I think that is fine, but I haven't got the liberty to just talk about these things. I always have to kind of defend my raison d'être. Am I allowed to exist?
Mm-hmm. Max, you seem to dismiss the idea of Heimat altogether. I mean, for you, there should be no central position. There should be no Heimat. You could, if I'm right.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, all of that, like all that has been said now, is something that I could just assign. So let me just add to that. I mean, let's start by saying that what has been said before is that Heimat is a very specific term to control what you mean by belonging. So who belongs to society and how and why is something that can be explained in very different ways, and that is in fact explained in very different ways in different societies. And in Germany, Heimat is a very specific political term. So we're not talking about a private idea of Heimat, which could be something like Berlin is meine Heimat, Friedrichshain is meine Heimat, you know, whatever you want to say. I think we're not talking about that. We're talking about a political usage of the term Heimat, which really has come back to German politics with the return of a völkisch right-wing party to the parliament. So we're talking about Heimat being a reaction to the way right-wing politics have tried to do agenda setting. And Heimat was one of the central terms right-wing brought back into politics. So I'd be very skeptical about adopting a right-wing term without being very careful about the strategy you're trying to employ by appropriating this term. I don't see any strategy. All I can see is a naive, felt idea or notion of Heimat just feeling like the cozy, warm place you're coming from. Funny thing, though, is that the last 50 years in Germany really do not match up to this cozy idea of Heimat. It just doesn't. And if it does for some people, it certainly doesn't for minorities and Jews. So what we're talking about is a very specific term that can only be employed from a perspective of a dominant German position. Because besides that, Heimat is really not something positive and cozy and nice and warm. So we are already kind of finding a very specific dominant position trying to say that Heimat is a general term when in fact it's very specific. So that's the one thing. And the second would be that I guess I can see, I can identify a wider tendency within the German present to gloss over the past, to kind of reinvent your own past. You know, after the 80s and 90s of being the world champions of remembrance, suddenly Germany feels like it's being allowed, or allows itself again, to reinvent its own past by rebuilding a Prussian castle, by rebuilding an old church in Potsdam. I'm just bringing up random examples, you're going to find a lot of them, which is kind of trying to rebuild things that are kind of beyond Nazi times. So what you find is really a tendency to, and within this tendency, you also find the term of Heimat to reestablish a notion of a positive German history, when I would say German history really doesn't supply this kind of positive pool of whatever you want to find there, if you want to reinvent a German tradition.
The Heimatministerium, the Ministry of Heimat, can be seen as some sort of as an attempt to compensate the fact that suddenly the extreme right becomes very popular in Germany. Is that a right suggestion?
Well, that was very, very specific in renaming the Ministry of the Interior as Heimatministerium. It was actually sold to the German public as an attempt to appropriate the right-wing term of Heimat. So that was very outspoken. We're not making this up. This is very clear. The question is whether this is working. And funny thing is that not only the CDU and CSU, which is a conservative party and by nature will be very close to concepts like Heimat, you can also find left-wing or left-of-center parties like the Greens, the Left, or the Social Democrats, which are more to the center, which kind of just without any hesitation jump on that term. And I think that is something that we have been thinking about in this book a lot. Different articles go different ways, trying to wonder, why is this term that attractive to a lot of people? And why does a left-wing politics, which 20 years ago wouldn't dream about using a term like Heimat, suddenly jump on a term like that? So really, I think what we can find in this relabeling of the Ministry of the Interior is not so much a reaction to a right-wing party, but rather that the rise of a right-wing party is an expression of a changed, let's say, mood within German society that is moving more towards the direction of a more nationalistic, more patriotic idea of what it means to belong to Germany.
That doesn't only happen in Germany, though.
No, of course not. That is one of the reasons why people have been interested in this book outside of Germany. I mean, I've been invited to England to speak about this book, and I thought, why? And then you notice, no, there are loads of similarities. There are loads of specifics in Germany, but there are loads of similarities. I would like to agree and disagree. I genuinely think there is one tendency where people say Heimat and they don't mean a nationalistic version of a homeland of some past where everybody was white and all this, but they actually mean we need a feeling of belonging, and we need a feeling of we want to keep this society together. And because the term is so vague, so people can see in it whatever they want. It's like kind of Rorschach test. You see in it what you want to see, and you think you're talking about the same thing, but you're not. You're actually talking about different things. And when I say it is a necessary evil, or like Antiquam Appiah, the philosopher, he said it's the lies that bind. We do need a kind of story, a kind of narrative. Why are we all in this together? I mean, a nation is a fiction. A nation doesn't exist, but it's a fiction that everybody believes in, and that's why it works. So how could we find a narrative, create a narrative that is productive and that is inclusive? And I've talked to loads of people, and some people say the word Heimat, the term Heimat, does not work. You have to give it up. You've got to put it in the bin of history, and you've got to use a different term. But I know that loads of people still work at redefining it, and I don't want to tar them all with the same brush. I don't want to say they're all right-wing, because they're not. But yeah, it has been very, very misappropriated. And if you say the word and ask people, what do you imagine? They all imagine stags at bay. And they all have these very specific images that are not inclusive, that are very, I mean, that are 50s Germany, that they are not even real, like kind of silver furs and stags and
I agree.
And dirndls, especially dirndls. There's no dirndls worn in my part of Germany ever up until now, and now everybody wears them. You say, oh, that's Oktoberfest in our part of Germany. Why? That's not our tradition.
Yeah.
We don't want the foreign traditions coming to our part of Germany.
No, I understand that. It's especially my generation, mea culpa, who seems to have a strong longing for the 50s. They were never there in the 50s. I mean, they weren't even born. But a lot of
I have a strong longing for the 70s, but not for the real 70s, obviously.
Oh, they were great, I can tell you.
If you can remember the 70s, you weren't there.
I was too young not to remember them. No, but what I'm saying is it's not only a problem in Germany. It's not a specific German problem, but that struck me. And maybe there was something I kind of missed in this book, and that was 40 years, at least 40 years, of disastrous neoliberal ideology, which has turned the world into a global village, which has turned civilians into consumers or workers for states that consider themselves to be something like companies. Is it that this longing for a place where you feel at home, secure, not interrupted by anything strange, is it possible that it also has to do with this devastating, in my eyes, devastating neoliberalism? Because the EU, for instance, is based on this neoliberalism and has paid no attention to cultural diversity within Europe only, and that somehow gives people the feeling that they don't belong here anymore. Is that? I'm just trying something here. Don't be silent. Interrupt me.
No. Yeah, it's interesting what you say, and it's yeah. I think it's a very valid point, and the question is just because you speak of not belonging, and I think the book speaks all the time about not belonging, but from a different perspective. So what you were just trying to talk about, maybe I'm just interpreting, is yeah, this longing for Heimat from the perspective of a person who's actually part of, let's say, white Christian mainstream society or dominant society in Germany, but has the feeling that this is not my country anymore somehow. And I think, yeah, we left that out in the book, and I think that was by purpose, because this is something that is being discussed in so many other books and platforms and talk shows and articles. And I think our collection or our essays are more about, not all of them, but mostly are actually about people who feel like they belong here, but they are told that they don't. So, for example, when we come back to the Heimatministerium, the problem was also the minister who's leading this new ministry. The first days he was in office, Horst Seehofer. The first days he was when he was in office, he used, his the press or the public in order to express like that certain people don't belong to this society. He made very clear slogans. They were headlines everywhere. Muslims don't belong to German society. Migrants are the problem, the biggest problem of the society, and so on. And this is the expression of his ideology. It's not reflecting the reality. We are part of this society for generations, and society profited so much from us also. So it's basically, yeah, it's just you could say it's a lie, you could say it's just a weird ideology, but so it makes really clear why this ministry was sort of founded, and why it is so threatening to us, or why this word is also not, it's not just a word, why this concept and this political development is threatening to so many marginalized communities. But when we talk about neoliberalism and this idea of individualism, I would say that also sort of helped or led to people thinking that they're responsible for their own problems and miseries. To a certain extent, of course, you are responsible for yourself and for your problems, but it makes invisible also the structures behind it. So if you fail to have success in education, if you fail to have a good job that pays well and that you're not overqualified for, then it's your own failure, basically, and it's not the racist structures, it's not like the German education system, which reproduces social imbalances that are here for decades. Yeah, so I think that's where I think it is in the book, maybe not clear enough, but that's where actually, neoliberalism also kind of separated people from one another who could fight for the same cause because they face the same problems and make the same experiences, and maybe we should organize a little more and speak a little more about it in order to make the structural thing visible.
Yes, because please do, Marc. Yes,
I'd like to add to that. I think I'd love to talk about capitalism and class, because I think there's a lot to be said, especially about a society that is increasingly, and that is also something that is not unique to German society, combining the question of migration and exclusion with the question of like lower classes and exclusion, right? Because migration and lower class position tends to overlap.
Yes.
But if we're talking about the specific situation of Heimat, and I'm taking it right from your question, if you say, if people don't feel like they don't belong anymore, what that implies is that there was a time when they did feel like they belong. And it tends to kind of not be the ones who are being excluded today and who are writing in this book, to be the ones who are nostalgic about the past. So I wouldn't be too nostalgic about the German past, maybe any other past, but especially this one. But I do find there's a second thing that connects to what Mithu said, that I tend to hear a lot in the last maybe months, maybe years, and that is that we lack an inclusive narrative. Mm-hmm. And it tends to come from liberals that are afraid to take a left-wing position. I feel like that because I feel like in Germany after 45, of course, we have a very strong unifying narrative, and it's called anti-fascism. And I find it very interesting that people tend to deny the narrative that is there, asking and wondering about another one. And I'm wondering about the function this has, because it's a bit like, do we have a narrative? And then anti-fascism is raising its arm and saying, yes, we do have one. You're saying, nothing? So we should look for one. So look, this is what happens. You kind of deny the basis on which this country is being rebuilt on, which is anti-fascism. If you look at the Grundgesetz and the founding legislature, you'll find that very clearly. And you deny that in order to ask for something that you then can give the answer of, we need Heimat. Mm-hmm. So this is how it works in my eyes. You kind of push aside the left-wing answer in order to kind of give another answer, which is very conservative, and it has a very much stronger connection to traditions that have been dangerous and that are becoming dangerous again now.
And why is that? Why does that happen?
Why does that happen? I absolutely love the idea that we have a narrative and it's called anti-fascism, because that I do feel as part of that, and that makes sense. But even in my youth and in my anti-fascist groups, it was still this. It was still a white narrative, and which is not true. And if you look at who has fought fascism and everything, but it was still, the idea was that left-wing anti-fascist groups, and I'm just talking about kids, about adolescents, were young white kids. And if I wanted to look at any kind of, I wanted to see myself in a mirror, in a kind of, like Zadie Smith says, Britain or England, this great mirror, and she without a reflection. And that was always my feeling towards Germany, like I didn't exist, people like I didn't exist, and that's what I mean with the narrative. I wanted to be, in a kind of way, I wanted to be able to see myself in this country. And the other day I went to the market, and in the town where I live, there was a little market, and I live in Düsseldorf. In Düsseldorf Post-Colonial, it's a group, and they want to rename streets. And this is also an anti-fascist tradition, to rename streets. And there was this joke when I was growing up, and I tried to translate it, and translated jokes are always lousy, but you've got to laugh anyway. So basically, the joke was that an older guy gets onto the tram, and he says, "Oh, I want to go to Adolf Hitler Square." And the tram driver is quite shocked and says, it's not called Adolf Hitler Square any longer, it's called Graf Adolf Square, which means Lord Adolf Square. And he says, "Oh, have they made him a lord by now? That was high time." And everybody thought that is absurd, but there's so many streets in Düsseldorf which are still called after colonial mass murderers, and we know about this. There has been a commission of scientists and historians, and they said, please, at least 10 streets have to be renamed. They say, yes, but that would cost €500, one street sign. You think, really, is that too much? Would I really like to live in a street which says this is mass murder street? No, it hasn't. So I think it belongs together, and like you can't think anti-colonial without thinking anti-fascism. I think it belongs together, it goes together, and like everything, like Germany tried out how can we build concentration camps on the Haifischinsel. They tried it out on the Herero and Nama. They tried out how can we do this kind of mass murder. How can we do it very effectively? And we need to think the two things together. And then I think even the anti-fascist tradition can become more inclusive, which does not mean we've got to get rid of anti-fascism. I think it strengthens the idea.
The problem maybe also is that a lot of the, well, let's call them white community, are not aware that they're born into some sort of cultural reality, of something that is portrayed as a cultural reality. I'll give you an example. I was not brought up religious in any way. Not anti-religious either. My parents always told me you have to have respect for any religion coming around, but I never saw a church from the inside when I was small. Until I was 15, 16, I suddenly realized, wait a minute, I may not be religious, but I was born into a Christian culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Predominantly. And I have to find out what that's all about, and have to see what's good about it and what's not good about it. I think when we're dealing with this longing for something that has been, or this wanting to be home again, it has something to do with this. It has to do with what you've learned as a child. With what was Columbus. He's the one who discovered America. No, he didn't. Which is a nuisance, because it's in your head, and it's very comfortable that it's in your head. That's how the world is structured. We Europeans, Columbus, we discovered America. No, we didn't. And there are lots of those truths that need to be entlarvt, würde ich sagen, that need to be addressed from within the white culture. So it's not so much it's not so much that the other culture, other cultures that have come into our culture are the problem. I think our culture itself and the objectiveness with which it is regarded is the problem.
Well,
awareness of that should be strengthened.
I think it's a little bit like Fatma said, it's a different kind of book. It's not I'm sorry, it is not even a book for you. It's not a book, and this doesn't mean you can't read it. This doesn't mean you can't profit from it, but it is really about what feels wrong for us. How do we feel in this situation, and what are our needs in here? Because we wanted to flip the perspective completely for once. And I do understand this longing for a safe space, and this is a human condition. We all want a safe space that doesn't exist. I mean, I think Sigmund Baumann, he called it retrotopia, like this, a past that has been kind of golden, that never existed, no matter how far back we go. Maybe before human settlement, it might have been, we're all nomads, it might have been better. There are loads of indications for that, but I don't think we can go that far back. So this longing, and if you can, and this is one of the things that we are talking about. If you look into the past, it will always be exclusionary. So if you want to build a nation, if you want to build a society, you've got to look into the future. You've got to say, what kind of society do we want to be? Where do we want to go together? And a bit like Canada, this unity and diversity, which is doesn't mean they live it all the time, but it's a very strong mantra, and everybody gets taught it at school, and so that changes something. And we say, oh, we go back to somewhere before. I don't know, we are very unclear about it. Do we go back before fascism or not? So we don't really say when this before is.
Fatma?
Yeah. Yeah, Mithu just said this wonderful sentence, this book is not really for you, to Marc.
Thank you.
I think it is, actually. Also, I think because what you said before, Mithu, that not everyone who believes in Heimat or likes this image or uses this word is right-wing. I totally agree with that. But I think one of the aims of our book was also to question this kind of naive use and naive thinking of, we can just take this word and do something nice with it, and not think about what other implications this has for I don't know, members of minorities, for example, or people who just know about it. So that's the one thing, and the other thing I wanted to add is that I don't know, like the self-understanding of this country is also, it was briefly mentioned. I mean, I never heard about colonialism at school, which is weird. I went to sort of a nice school in South Germany, and I was not the most attentive student, but I think I would remember if I would have heard about it. And when we spoke about Third Reich and the NS time and the Holocaust, we spoke about it in history class, but that's also like how I said before, it's just something that's in history class and in history books and in Hollywood movies, and it's over a long time ago, because we didn't really speak about what happened after World War II and how a lot of Nazis actually got rehabilitated into society very quickly, into decision-making positions. And I think these are the things that we really need to consider and speak about, and a lot of people do. Marc's books and writings are playing like a key role here, I would say, and also so many other authors. But since our book came out last year, in February it came out, after that, since now there were so many racist attacks happening, 2 major incidents where several people were murdered by right-wing extremists.
Yes.
In last summer in Halle and this February in Hanau. And well, it's just devastating also that, for example, the person, the murderer in Hanau, he killed, I think, was it 10 people? I hope, yeah, 10 people got killed. There is a reluctance to label him as a right-wing extremist, for example, in the mainstream, which I cannot understand, or many people can't understand, because it's so clear that he acted out of racist motives, that he was openly following like a right-wing extremist ideology, and he was already striking before, so. But we always kind of get, also similar thing happened in Halle and in other cases as well. We always get this theory of like an Einzelgänger, Einzeltäter, an outsider who was, you know, just frustrated and wanted his name to be known and did something crazy, but he's not really organized in like a major organization, whatever that might be, because you just need your cell phone to organize with people or get information. And I would just really, to get away also just from the term and idea Heimat, it would be really great if you know, Germany would start to investigate right-wing extremism, for example, with the same efforts it did very successfully with Islamism in the last 2 decades, because there's like a big problem there. And every time this happens, everybody's shocked, and we talk about it for 2 days, and there's like these events for remembrance, and the Heimatminister actually goes there and expresses his condolences to the families of the victims. But actually, there's like a direct connection between his rhetoric and what is happening later. I cannot see that separately. Yeah, so investigation in right-wing extremism, but then again, the question is, where do you start with this extremism? Because actually you should start in the parliament, where some parliament members are employing neo-Nazis who are being paid with our tax money. So it's very like complicated and complex, but it's just very necessary to openly speak about this and to make these things clear that some people don't know or are not aware of, although, you know, you can get the information very easily.
Yes, Marc.
Right. Yeah, I just pick up on that thread again and just try to, I'd like to point out one thing which I think may be important if we talk about Heimat and a more general need for people to belong or to identify, or however we want to call that, which is, I think there's a certain danger to connect a general need to a specific concept. And this goes back to something that I think we talked about before, which is that Heimat is a very specific concept with a specific history. And I think one thing this book is trying to ask, and I think all of us are trying to kind of work out in our works, is that we don't need to limit ourselves to those concepts. We do not need to limit ourselves to a concept like Heimat, or even to a desire to kind of redeem the society or to love Germany again or something, but that actually we're living in a society that is very different from the society how it used to be, and that this difference produces a potential for different concepts as well. And what happens is that those concepts kind of produce it, I'd even say, a certain tendency to stick. So they stick to something that has been overcome because society has changed. So in a way, what we see right now is that Fatma already mentioned the term radical diversity, that we're living in a society that is radically diverse. Maybe it has been before, but by now, within the last 30 years, also this has become a part of the law and a part of the way minorities have come to think about themselves. Yeah. So suddenly what we see is a society that is different and that cannot be captured by terms like Heimat, integration, and what have you. So in a way, I think what we're trying to get at is not to just say no need for Heimat, but to say there's different concepts we can think of and that we need to think of in order to meet the present the way it's happening right now. So we're trying to say it's inadequate. We're not trying to say that there shouldn't be any concepts for society to regulate belonging. I mean, probably that is something that's going to happen anyway. But we don't have to be fixed to the set of concepts that German tradition provides. That I think maybe mainstream German tradition provides. I'd even argue that once we start looking for difference, also within German tradition, we're going to find a lot of minority or, let's say, militant culture, wehrhafte Poesie, wehrhafte Kultur, that is going to be a resource to kind of reimagine a German present.
Is that the task for the artists, to reinvent? For the poet?
I think it's not a surprise and not a coincidence that a lot of people that are just in the last years kind of coming up and shaping discourse, especially from a younger generation, are at the same time political thinkers and part of the political discursive sphere, and at the same time artists, writing novels, doing theater, all that. I mean, one of the most important places for this kind of post-migrant discourse has been a theater in the last years. And I think that is a substantial change. 30 years ago, probably newspapers and feuilleton would have taken that position, and now we just see how, in a way, art has taken a more central function, I'd say, in asking for those new concepts. But maybe, I mean, that'd be something that I'm sure there's going to be different perspectives on that as well.
Well, maybe if you allow me the question, maybe this book specifically isn't for me, but certainly Fatma, your novel was meant for me.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, this book, it was just
take it all back. I take
yeah,
it all
taking it back.
Sorry.
But this book wasn't specifically written for me, the Albtraum book, but your novel certainly was written for me, right?
For you?
Well, not only for me, but I mean, there is a difference between this political
I still argue
sphere.
both books are totally for you, and they're really not for you. You know, it's not that I sit down and think, because some readers of my first novel, Bogen, which is the story of, it's like a coming-of-age story of a young Turkish-German woman in Berlin who, has an outburst of violence in the middle of the book. So the book is a lot about discrimination, about racism, about sexism, but also about violence and power relations in the German society and later in the Turkish society as well. But yeah, so some people asked this question actually, or said, did you write this book? It's good for, white Germans to read and to understand how these girls they see in the metro feel like. And I think it's kind of weird because it was not the idea that I had.
It wasn't what I meant either. It's just that.
Okay. So in general, when I speak about why I write or how I write or for whom I write, I would say, like in Heimat now, in the Albtraum book, I'm writing a text about work, and it's a personal essay. I write about myself, and I write about my family,
yes.
And their experiences. They came as my grandparents and parents came as so-called guest workers, just migrant workers. They were not guests at all. With this recruitment agreement in Germany, and were cheap labor, cheaper than the white German workers, and it's like I write about myself, but it's in order to connect to other people who maybe have similar experiences and similar realities. and maybe feel also the similar pressure, the way I explain it in the book, that I feel always the pressure that I have to work harder and, you know, save some more money, that I have still the same existential, you know, fear for,
yes.
Even though my financial situation is so much more secure than it was for my grandparents or for my parents in my age, but still I somehow inherit this. And yeah, the idea of writing these kind of texts is to connect to other people, and I really got so much feedback on this. So what I'm saying is, I'm not writing, when I write about myself, it's not about, it's not a diary entry or something. It's just to make other people seen, to make them feel seen. Not that I'm speaking for other people. I'm just presenting my story so they can find maybe words or reflect their own story, and yeah, to also empower people who don't feel seen in maybe you know, in the popular culture or in books they see in the library.
I would like to add to that, because this is a bit like, when I said the book isn't for you, I meant it in the way that when Toni Morrison says, I'm not writing for white people, I'm writing for black people. That does not mean that her readers can't be white as well, but it does mean that when she's imagining who she's talking to people she doesn't have to explain herself to. She isn't going to say, now I'm going to tell you something about a very different lifestyle to your own. She's basically talking on a different level to them. And in Germany, when you write, especially when you write novels, then they imagine the reader to be white, and they imagine the reader to be white, middle class, and male, even though most readers are female. They do all these surveys, and even that doesn't. So, so if you have a proposal that differs from that diverges from that, and they tell you, oh, that isn't real literature. This is, they had in the 80s, they had this lovely word, guest workers literature. So what? So, and they've all, and now they've got women's literature and migrant. No, it's all literature. It either is literature, it's not, but it's not literature. You might talk about children's literature. I might agree on that one, but everything else is just literature for the world. But it is, in Germany we have this idea of this is not real, and this is, if we've done one, then we've done them all. So if we've done, I don't know, the book about the Korean, third generation Korean kid, then we don't have to do any more POCs for this year, which is crazy, because no. So we've done one white male, so no more books about white male college professors who fall in love with their young students. No, there are loads of really interesting books about them. I've learned stuff, but I wasn't the intended reader. I wasn't the audience, even though I can learn from that. But it means I have to make the extra effort. I have to empathize with this kind of position, and I've got to get out of my comfort zone. And this book was very nice, because in some ways I could stay inside my comfort zone. I felt at home in this book.
In Album.
Actually in the Heimat book, but in Album, yeah, I was talking to Fatma. I said, when I read Album, I recognize so much from my childhood, even though it's so different, or from my adolescence. It's so different, but there are so many similarities. And it is good if you have both. It's good if you want to read, to get something new, or to look at the world through somebody else's eyes, but it's also nice if you read and you've got the feeling, I am this person, I'm the person in the book, this is about me, I'm a relevant human being, because this is what literature tells us. You are relevant, and we can have empathy with you, and there's a big empathy economy. So who do we empathize with and who don't we empathize with? So with Corona, leave no one behind, but of course, the refugees, no, we don't even have to give them water. What? So we have this massive empathy economy, and one of the things literature does is it makes us emphasize with different groups of human beings. And that is what I wanted to say. I didn't want to say, don't read the book. Please read the book.
No, of course not.
Please read it again. Read it many times.
I'm not offended at all. No, that's
what
not
a
it.
Pity.
No, and to you, Fatma, I only wanted to say this book absolutely spoke to me. Ellbogen, I'm talking about Ellbogen now, and I had a feeling that this approached everything we talked about now in a different way, because it focuses more on the experience of things than on the concepts behind it and all the thoughts you could have with it. That's what I was asking about, actually, and why I think that after what's being said here, artists, for instance, poetry too, I suppose, plays a very important role in this invention of well, let's call them new realities, as opposed to the terminology that we're stuck with at the moment. It's a question.
It was the question. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I love fiction. I loved working on this nonfiction book as well, but I mean, I just wrote an essay which is a few pages long. I don't know how it would feel to write a whole nonfiction book. I read nonfiction books, good nonfiction books. I love to read them. But now that I'm working on my second novel, I really feel how fiction is for me. Yeah, it's just not my passion, but the tool which is the most powerful to me, not just because it's just fun to write and somehow I get published and people buy my books and it's a job now, but also if we look at it from a political point of view, you know, I always look up to political activists because I see so many people, friends who have so much power and can invest so much, you know, love and time in working for a future that should be comfortable for all of us. So they work for so many other people and they like never stop working. And I'm like, wow, I could never do this. I really admire that. But maybe I'm not supposed to do the same, you know? Maybe it's just I have a different tool. I'm a writer. I can write texts. And maybe I can use my texts in order to, you know, help shape a different narrative, help shape a different kind of, you know, place, community, whatever, and to express, you know, the problems. Because me as a writer, as a reader also, I'm not so much interested in artworks, in books that are really explicitly acting as if they don't have anything to do with politics. I don't believe that something can be completely, you know, separate from politics. But I have the feeling that in the last decades, that's what I read from older books and hear also from older colleagues, that it kind of had like it was like a bad taste thing to mix arts with politics, especially to, to be too much activist, whatever that means in your artwork, work of art. Yeah, I think that's not interesting to me.
Max, would you call your poetry political?
I think as long as we talk in English, yes. There's a very specific reason for that, because in Germany, the adjective political within the poetry field had a bit of a bad reputation from the 80s on. And I think there's something in it with like an exaggerated agitprop poetry, agitation propaganda, which was really a bit on the blunt side. But at the same time, I feel like I've been trying to understand why it was that when I entered the poetry field in the late 2000s, political poetry, the adjective political had that bad of a reputation. And I guess there's something in a very specific, like a very specific way, the way postmodern thought and postmodern writing has been perceived in Germany after the linguistic turn, which was every work with language is political. So every political work with language is taking it too far, I guess. So it's an exaggeration, because since language is constructing the world anyway, every work we do is going to be a construction of the world and by definition political. So why should we even bother to be political?
I see.
I think that is I think one thing that in a way there was an aesthetic tradition or aesthetic fashion of not being political. But I think there's a deeper meaning behind that as well, a deeper reason behind that as well. And it connects to what we have been talking about before, which is, I think, the desire, a deep-seated desire not to talk about history, or to say, to try to get away from the fact that everything we do and every work we do with words is a work that is within a very, like a tradition and a history. So to get away from this post-national socialist present we're still living in. And I think if you want to do something like if you want to deconstruct hierarchies within language by using language, I guess what you have to do is to kind of get away from the fact that language itself is already carrying this kind of hierarchies you're trying to dismantle. So I feel like there's something very intrinsic in the way poetry has tried to envision a utopian, different language that kind of made it difficult for people to go head on with the political perspective. But for myself, I'd rather go with, I think it was Godard, the movie maker, who once said, it's not about doing political movies, he says. It's not about doing political movies, but doing movies political. So I'd rather do that. I'd rather say it's about doing poetry political with a certain conscience, by knowing what you're doing. And then I feel like this whole difference of activism on the one hand and art on the other really doesn't matter that much anymore. Yes. Because in a way, once you have a political mindset, also what happens is that suddenly, like things specific to activism, like, I don't know, squatting a place, going out and doing a demonstration, you're raising funds, all that kind of stuff, can be easily combined with techniques that you find in art, like irony, like appropriating stuff, turning it around, giving spin into public discussion. That can all be a part of a political activism or an attempt to change the way we think about the present.
Mithu talked about it when you said about there's literature and that's it. But isn't there a danger that when your book is published, your novel is published, your book poetry is published, and then there's the reception of this book. In the reception, often the books are reduced again to the specific positions. Fatma has written a book about Turkish immigrants.
Well, but that is I always like to give that example. So if Zadie Smith writes a book about London, loads of Londoners, and some of them come from the Caribbean, and if Günter Grass writes a book about a white German man, then we say, oh, he has written a book about the world, and she has written a book about one section of the world, and that is our perception of it. And yes, it could, there's always a danger of being reduced, but it's also that we are trying to break that up and to shatter that in the way we are working in the way. Also, I mean, most of us are also journalists, so we are reviewing, and I have reviewed this book, and I didn't review the book because of Fatma. I reviewed it because I really thought this is an important German novel because it says something about Germany. It says something about our society. It's a very, in loads of aspects, it's a very German book. It's not a Turkish book at all. It's a very German book because this is our state of mind at the moment. This is where we are. These are the problems we are grappling with.
Yes. Well, I must say I'm still very jealous of the review culture in Germany because here in Belgium it's largely disappeared. It's just consumers' information almost with a few stars. 3 stars is good, but actually, you know, it's not good. And 4 stars is better. And 5 stars, and you've written a fantastic book. And why it gets 3, 4, or 5 stars is not even important. So I'm very, very jealous of the German review culture where, well, that sort of articles still appear. They don't appear here. And here it's very often the case that books are reduced to something that society journalists can work with. and that's a pity. But that's why I was asking the question. Do you run the risk that your book is being reduced to the same slogans that you try to escape by writing it?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't even care anymore because, I mean, that was my first book and it happened. Of course it happened. I don't know. It's just that I don't, because I have also friends, authors who are really like for years, they keep trying to fight these labels that, you know, of the immigrant literature and which is always, you know, coming with a name that's not sounding German enough about people who are not all white. But I don't really care anymore because it's like somehow there's like a market and the book is somehow also a product on this market and there's like marketing tools and I'm trying to overview what the publisher does and I'm trying to intervene when it gets too stupid somehow, which can happen. But I cannot, I already know, or I learned with the first book that I cannot control everything because, yes, there are like so many other parameters. There's, you know, the audience needs like keywords to understand on the first look what this is about and stuff like that. I'm totally, yeah, I don't like the term or the label immigrant literature, but I don't have the power to like keep talking about it like the whole day or fighting it because I think like I would probably find a problem with every label that is put on there, which is not like fiction or adult fiction or young adult. Yeah, it's how I said, it was frustrating in the beginning, but now it's just like I'm okay with it, and because I even don't know how to talk about the book sometimes. It's not, I'm saying, I just said again Turkish German woman, but actually she's Kurdish, which is one part of the problem in the book, and it's not really, so it's not even the right definition that I'm giving. It's maybe I should just stop talking about what she is and just say she's a young person who's and this book is about violence and love and, you know, fleeing your home and becoming an adult. So yeah, I should maybe erase the labels that I'm also reproducing while talking about it.
I think it's what I really remember is, and is very important, I think, in this whole discussion, is that we should try to reinvent the reality that we already live in, and the reinvention is finding the right words, right terms to describe that new reality. And this book, Your Heimat, is our nightmare. I keep calling it Heimat and not homeland. I think is a very good example of how people can be made aware of that.
But it's also it all sounds so individualistic. So everybody has to be more good-willed, and like they say, a good heart and good intentions are not going to get you all the way home. So if we redefine that term, it's the politics that should redefine it. It's the Heimat Ministry that really should say, what do you mean by Heimat, and what are your aims? And then we can talk about whether we agree on them. And we also should have, I've always get feedback, but I'm talking over you. And you mentioned, Fatma mentioned Hanau, and after Hanau, when 10 people were killed, and in the media they all repeated, it's the murderer, the terrorist, he did it because of fear of foreigners. And no, we're not foreign. All of us have been born in Germany. We are Germans. This is what Germans look like. So we've also got to kind of get this into our heads and not keep repeating, these are the foreigners and they can't define who's us. We've got to redefine us.
Yes. That goes for all of us. I mean,
absolutely.
Yes.
And then you don't have to be white any longer. Isn't that nice?
First of all, I'm pink. I'm not white. No. I'm very pink, actually. Pinker than I would like to be.
But this is a political term, isn't it? Because when you look at the map of the world, it used to be all pink because that was Great Britain. All the countries that Great Britain had kind of conquered, they were pink.
It was my daughter who pointed out to me that one of the scandalous things about just coloring as a child, she found that there was one pencil which was called skin color.
Oh, shall I tell you how difficult it is for me to buy makeup? Or no, I don't, because they haven't got my color. And think, wait, this is Germany. This is 2020. It should be possible to sell. Yeah.
But skin color was obviously, well, my color, right? And she really was upset by this. Just goes to show, even pencil makers should redefine their colors. I would really like to thank you, unless someone still has to add something. Really like to thank you for this conversation.
Thank you too, Marc. It was great talking to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching our discussion on Your Homeland is Our Nightmare. My name is Sonja Longolius, and together with Janika Gelinek, I'm the director of the Literaturhaus Berlin. I would like to thank Mithu Sanyal, Marc Reugebrink, who spoke to us from Brussels, and Fatma Aydemir and Max Czollek, who were here in Berlin with us. Thanks also to the Goethe Institute in Brussels and Passa Porta, the International House of Literature. Today, we have all met in another kind of homeland of ours, the internet, and this on European terms, somewhere in between Brussels and Berlin. So maybe this also can give us an idea about the different kind of narrative that we need to shape in order to be more inclusive and in order to form a narrative that all of us are invited and welcome to be in. I would like to thank all the participants of the discussion, all our cooperation partners, and I'm sending my best wishes from Berlin, from the Literaturhaus Berlin, to all over Europe. Thank you very much.